There is an answer to the difficulties in the Balkans. There is actually a clear answer, Heather. First, I want to thank Jabir for this organizing this outstanding conference. Really exceptional, and yes, and Wolfgang as well. And thank you for the invitation here. Quickly, I'm gonna. This is the last panel. I'm gonna end the way it began with my good friend and co-director, Sasha Ordanovsky. You mentioned recommendations, so we have them. And this are broader than the content. I just want to emphasize what we did. We just are coming now from NATO headquarters. We have discussed these in depth with the new Deputy Secretary General, Radmila Shekarinska, here, the former defense minister here, obviously well known. And I also had the honor not only to meet with Radmila, but also to present this to Secretary General Mark Rutte. So the point is this, Heather. It's not that you all need to dive in and get these recommendations. These are from youth leaders around the region. The point is to be concrete, to come to not just say, gee, EU, gee, NATO, there's a problem and so forth, but to really, what we asked these youth leaders from each of the WB6, including North Macedonia, plus 2 SAIS students, was, what should NATO do? And let me tell you, they are very interested. You think, oh, they went up there pro forma. No. We were there. I won't go into details, but let's just say Balkans were the topic of the day, of the very day that we were at NATO. So they are interested, they're concerned, and they want ideas. And so my message is about recommendations is be concrete with them and be proactive in sharing them, and I'll share this with you. Now, to answer your question, I'm going to segue and give you the answer. You asked, gee, who would we talk to actually resolve and stabilize this? I would say the other point, Heather, that you're absolutely correct about is that there is a lot that we, the U.S. and EU together, NATO, can learn from this region. I think it's actually very interesting in many respects. The Balkans, and here's the key word, the Balkans have been a harbinger. It happened first in the Balkans, and then it happened everywhere else. It's actually a harbinger. Think back to the late 1980s. What was happening? Rest of Eastern Europe was completely quiet, calm. You had Slobodan Milosevic, you had Kosovo, you had the end of Kosovo autonomy, and guess what I'm going to remind you of? One of the most fundamental facts overlooked by so many officials. Removal of Kosovo's autonomy happened before the fall of the Berlin Wall, okay? So you had these processes in motion, which then all of a sudden the reawakening of history, all these ethno-national tensions, war, Russia and Ukraine, these type of aggressive power wars based on, in many respects, promoted and accentuated real differences, but then promoted and exploited by leaders like Milosevic, like Putin. So you have that, it's a harbinger. Is a harbinger here in North Macedonia. How? When? 2006, you had a new prime minister came in. I don't want to mention the name because it just becomes, it's unnecessary. But you had a prime minister who swiftly eroded the democratic constraints and essentially had the elements of what all autocratic powers want, to perpetual power. And then it was the wiretapping scandal and the protests, public protests in 2014, and then the Perugino Agreement 2015 that changed that. So that was again a harbinger really before Orban, before Viktor Orban. You had that model, that this electoral authoritarianism. You had that model here in North Macedonia. And so you see that. Then you had also you know, a false comparison. Many people lumped Montenegro and Milo Djukanovic in this kind of, oh, you know, yes, there's Serbia and Vucic and so forth, but there's Djukanovic in Montenegro too, and they're also, you know, Freedom House had them, you know, in a lower category and so forth. It turned out it wasn't true. It turned out that Milo Djukanovic, his party, he and his party suffered a defeat. What did he do? He recognized the result. His party still exists, and there's a, you know, a not so clear political formation and of course greater Serbian influence, but we see that it was fundamentally different. There wasn't this Djukanovic, I'm going to burn the house down. If I'm not calling the shots, I'm going to burn it all down. No, he had been in coalition before, and he backed out. You can have criticisms and so forth, but we can also have these. Sometimes we get into these false comparisons, Heather. So let me. I'm going to. You know, you asked your specific question, and I'm going to answer it with one of, I think, the most remarkable remarks, statements by a political figure in the Balkans that I can remember hearing in a long time. And this was by Serbian President Aleksandar Vucic just 36 hours ago. He used this phrase. It was absolutely astonishing. I couldn't believe that he would go with this. He used this phrase. This is not exact quote because he used the words in the same sentence, but it's a completely fair paraphrase. This is a completely fair paraphrase. He said, "I am not Assad. I am not Assad." This is Aleksandar Vucic. Well, really? I thought this was absolutely astonishing that he would think to invoke such a comparison. He said, and then, of course, you know, he turned it into his way. Oh, I will not run away. It was about the protests, and he turned it into an attempt to delegitimize the protesters, but in a very strange way. You know, and it shows you, even very shrewd leaders, like with communications, like Aleksandar Vucic, can make mistakes. It's almost always a mistake to use those words, "I am not." We have the famous case in the United States, Richard Nixon saying, "I am not a crook." And this, you're invoking the negative. And you invoke the negative. You're invoking the comparison. You're inviting people to compare you with Assad. And what is the point of that? What is the point of the comparison? Is the hollowness of the autocrat, the hollowness of the base of power of the autocrats. That what seems so invincible today with the command of the media, of the courts, of the military, you heard in the previous panel, the arrests of journalists, and what seems so invincible today can vanish like that. Whereas democracies, messy as they are, inefficient in many respects, they don't often just crumble in a moment as the house of cards falls down. And so I think that's really a striking reminder, and it's striking again that Vucic invoked this himself, and I think in that respect he has invited us to make the comparison in that respect, and that we should take him up on that. Really, you're not Assad? Well, actually, we see this, and actually, we see that. Then, Heather, I'll be brief here. It's been, you've had an outstanding session, and these folks are truly dedicated to stay with us here to the final session. But I want to give the panelists, my co-panelists, a chance here. But let me just quickly, you asked, so I'll give you the answer. I've published this. I've spoken about this. There is a solution to the Balkans. The Balkans are in a state of artificial suspension, and there's no better example than this country here, North Macedonia, which has twice been held hostage by these ethno-national issues for which it is not culpable. It took the Prespa agreement with Greece to relieve the veto on the NATO path. I want to say here for the record, again, we're in Skopje, we're in the North Macedonia. The Prespa agreement is an outstanding agreement. It's fair. Greece made very important concessions that support the Macedonian identity and the strength and sovereignty of this country, which is very important. You now have this veto from Bulgaria. It's completely outrageous. It's against the takozvani, as the friendship agreement, the so-called friendship agreement, which Sophia's behaved in anything but in the spirit of that agreement, and it's wrong. So North Macedonia has qualified, and I have my view. I did some interviews here. I have my view about what the government should do on that, but it's clear the obstacle is not within the country, and of course that is the blockage from the reforms and all of the steps that would have propelled this country and vastly improved the corruption situation and so many other issues. So there's that. But closed. So what is the solution? Okay. The point I mentioned at the top about Alexander Vucic and Serbia and him saying, I am not Assad. I will put the point to you this way very clearly. You cannot have a democratic, stable Balkans with an anti-democratic Serbia, okay? It doesn't work, okay? And in part, it's just size. Okay? Serbia is the biggest of the WB6. It has the biggest economy of the WB6. If you take it in comparison to Montenegro, the smallest of the WB6, the Serbian GDP is 14 times. For Montenegro, its #1 trading partner, both exports and imports, is Serbia. Okay? So you do the math in any calculation, politically, economically. If Serbia is in this continuing neo-Greater Serbia posture, here the Serb world posture, and here again, we heard it in the last panel, the pollution of the media sphere here with so many Serbian channels, you know, I think 90 on the cable, it's an enormous number, dozens that you get. This is a problem. This is a fundamental problem. So you cannot have this democratic advancement of the region with the largest country that has these interests in subverting neighbors, Montenegro, Bosnia-Herzegovina, and Kosovo. We don't have time, but there is a solution. It's very clear. The solution is Kosovo. Serbia is able to sustain this position because of the exploitation of the Kosovo issue. Those of you who are interested, I published this in a fairly well with co-authors from Serbia, Kosovo, and the non-recognizers. The only reason, I will tell you, this is my theory, and I'll close here, Jabbar, and turn it back to Heather. The only reason this whole thing, including the Bulgaria-Greece situation, because it never would have happened but for the fact that Serbia has never progressed, which gave opportunities to Bulgaria and Greece here. The only reason all of these countries are not in the European Union, the main reason, I should say, is because Europe is divided on Kosovo. That is the reason. And it's so obvious people don't even think about it. So this is the source of the stasis in Serbia. It's really just the 4 NATO non-recognizers: Greece, Romania, Slovakia, Spain. This is spelled out in our report. Our report is Johns Hopkins SAIS, Wilson Center. It's called From Crisis to Convergence. From Crisis to Convergence, a strategy to tackle instability in the Balkans at its source. From Crisis to Convergence. You can see in the executive summary, it's all spelled out. Those 4 countries, Greece, Romania, Slovakia, Spain, have handed their leverage to Belgrade, because they say, we won't recognize Kosovo until Belgrade does. That means Belgrade, it basically is like Sophia. They're basically giving their leverage. It's as if Serbia is a member of NATO or a member of the EU able to block. So all Belgrade has to do is to act as if it is participating in the dialogue, act there, get EU money, but it has no interest in resolving this issue. It has no interest in resolving it because it has the leverage. And so it continues to isolate Kosovo, to weaken Kosovo, to get derecognitions, and yet we're in a position where we need Serbia now even more. Lithium, the ammunition to Ukraine, which of course is financially beneficial to Serbia. They're not doing it as a favor to Ukraine. So that is the reason, and I just have to add, of course, that doesn't excuse Prime Minister Kurti from his own responsibilities. He has them. He has Kosovo Serb citizens, and he must treat them as full citizens, and that's true. But the structural problem is not in Pristina. The structural problem is in Belgrade and those non-recognitions. Heather, thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry. I know that we are running short of time, but I can't resist. I really do want to ask a follow-up question, because when I'm in Serbia talking to friends who have been involved with resisting Vucic in various ways, they're immensely frustrated, and something I hear again and again, sort of like this refrain, people say, no one can do anything, no one can challenge him. It's just, you know, it's this impenetrable thing. So what would you say to that? How, please.
Sure. It's a great question. Heather, it's a terrific question. You had folks here from Belgrade earlier, but they are doing something. Yeah. And this is why he said this about, I am not Assad. I will not run away. It was in the context of the protests. That's why it was foolish, in my opinion, very foolish for him to make that comparison. But he was, I will not run away. I will serve the Serbian citizens and against all these protesters who are just Western stooges. I'm paraphrasing now, but this is essentially, you know, his message, ridiculous message. Here, the train station collapses, and the people need to be motivated by Westerners. I mean, come on, it's a spontaneous and understandable anger, and it comes, and it's for a reason. It's because the people understand finally the cost of the corruption, of the relationship with China, and ultimately the point about democracy. What it is, what's the essence of democracy? It's about accountability. That's the essence of democracy. People always say transparency and accountability. It's not true. Democracy is about accountability. Not everything can be transparent. It's not true. Even democracies have to be able to have discrete conversations, and people like Julian Assange are completely wrong that you have to blow up everything. It's not true. It's about accountability. It's ultimately the accountability of the government to the governed, to the people. That's the essence of the democracy, and that's what he's being called to account on. And so there is, the answer, Heather, is they are able, even with all the disadvantages, they have shown their power. They proved it 3 years ago on lithium, which still remains very unpopular. The mining of lithium, we just hosted. I hosted last week a panel of Serbian experts. This was online. Anybody can find it. We called it a Serbian lithium boon or disaster. And you can have 5 very respected Serbian experts on it explaining why it's a problem. And it's across the political spectrum there. And they forced the government 3 years ago to shelve the project. And now, of course, he was in Germany. He was with Chancellor Scholz Vucic, and Schultz would say, oh, we need your lithium, et cetera. Well, guess what? The Serbian people have a vote in that, and they do have a vote, and that's really the point. They are not powerless in this.